In a small, sun-drenched living room, where worn-out furniture told stories of love rather than wealth, 5 identical heads were bent in solemn conference over a glowing tablet. The air was thick with the gravity of their mission. A conspiracy whispered between mouthfuls of morning cereal. Operation Daddy Audition. Final candidate selected, announced Owen, the self-appointed leader of the quintuplets, his small brow furrowed with a seriousness that belied his 7 years. He tapped the flawlessly manicured photo on the screen. The man in the picture was sharp-suited and severe, with eyes that seemed to see right through the camera lens. Charles Fields, CEO of Fields Group. Net worth: astronomical. According to our research, he has a 99.7% DNA match probability. A chorus of excited gasps rippled through the group. He looks so rich, whispered Oliver, tracing the man's chiseled jawline on the screen. Rich means Mummy won't have to work 3 jobs anymore, added Oscar, the pragmatist. And he's handsome, chirped Olivia, the sole girl, already imagining a perfect family portrait. Only one brother, a bookish boy named Orson, remained quiet, pushing his glasses up his nose. But what if he doesn't like us? Owen swiped to a different screen, a complex flowchart he'd designed himself. Phase 1 is the accidental encounter. Mommy has an interview at his company today. Phase 2 will commence upon her successful employment. Don't worry. The plan is flawless. Just then, Ruby Flores emerged from her bedroom, the source of their hushed plotting. She had pulled her dark, wavy hair into a neat bun and was smoothing the lapels of a simple but immaculate blazer, the best thing she owned. Her face, though etched with the faint lines of exhaustion, was illuminated by a fierce, hopeful light. This interview was their lifeline, a chance to finally break free from the undertow of bills and overdue rent. Okay, my loves, Mummy's heading out, she said, a voice a warm melody that filled their small home. She knelt, planting a kiss on each of the 5 foreheads. Be good for Mrs. Gable. I'll be back before you know it. Good luck. Mommy, they chorused, their faces masks of perfect innocence. She gave them one last, loving glance. 5 brilliant, beautiful boys, her entire world. She had no idea they were the secret architects of her fate. As the front door clicked shut, the 5 children exchanged knowing glances. Owen held up a tiny fist. Our plan can begin. The elevator at the Fields Group headquarters ascended with a silent, unnerving speed, each floor a step further away from Ruby's reality. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of money and ambition. When the doors opened onto the executive floor, she was met with a panorama of polished marble, minimalist art, and a chilling quiet. This wasn't an office. It was a temple dedicated to power. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she was led to a set of imposing mahogany doors. Mr. Fields will see you now. Ruby took a deep, steadying breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked in. The office was vast, encased in floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a breathtaking, godlike view of the sprawling city below. Seated behind a monolithic black desk was a figure silhouetted against the blinding morning light. He was looking over her file. Ruby Flores, he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. He slowly swiveled his high-backed leather chair to face her, and the world stopped. Time fractured, reality warped, and the air rushed from Ruby's lungs. It couldn't be. It was a nightmare, a cruel joke orchestrated by a merciless universe. The man staring back at her, his face now older, harder, and infinitely more formidable, was not just a potential employer. He was Charles Fields, the man who had occupied her dreams and haunted her waking moments for 7 agonizing years. A memory, sharp and brutal, sliced through her composure, rain lashing against a dark city street. A younger, desperate version of herself, pleading with him. Please, Charles. It's just for show. Her fake marriage to stop my family from selling me off. It would mean everything to me. His face had been a mask of cold indifference. His words like shards of ice. Everything to you, you mean nothing to me. He had turned and walked away, leaving her shattered on the pavement as his luxury car sped off, splashing muddy water all over her. The man before her now was the same, yet different. The youthful arrogance had crystallized into an unshakable authority. His gaze swept over her, taking in her simple attire, the faint tremor in her hands, and the raw, undisguised shock on her face. A flicker of recognition crossed his features. Cold and calculating, he knew. The silence in the room stretched until it was a physical weight, pressing down on her, suffocating her. He closed her resume with a soft, definitive thud. Ruby Fleury's, he repeated, his voice dangerously low, laced with an unspoken history that crackled between them. It's you, panic, primal and absolute, seized her. This was a mistake, a catastrophic error. She couldn't be here. She couldn't face him. Her only instinct was to flee. Without a word, she spun on her heel, her hand fumbling for the doorknob. Where do you think you're going? He moved with a predatory grace that defied his size, covering the distance between them in 3 long strides. Before she could escape, his hand closed around her wrist. The touch was like an electric current, a searing brand of heat against her cold skin. It was firm, unyielding, and terrifyingly familiar. She froze, her back to him, her breath caught in her throat. He leaned in closer, his voice a harsh whisper near her ear, a demand wrapped in steel. You don't just vanish for 7 years and then walk into my office for a job interview. You owe me an explanation. The air in Charles's office was a vacuum, sucking the breath from Ruby's lungs. His grip on her wrist was a manacle of cold steel and colder fury. You will tell me everything, he commanded, his voice a low growl that vibrated through her bones. Before she could form a defiant retort, a small voice cut through the tension. Are you busy, Mum? Both their heads snapped toward the door. Standing there, impossibly, was Owen, her eldest. He held a small toy car, his expression a perfect blend of innocence and calculation. Only a 7-year-old could master. Ruby's heart plummeted. Owen, what are you doing here? How did you? I came to help Daddy out a little, Owen announced, his gaze fixed on Charles with an unnerving confidence. He strode forward, a miniature CEO in the making, and placed the toy car on the edge of Charles's massive mahogany desk. As he did, his fingers brushed against a notepad, leaving behind a small, folded piece of paper. He gave Charles a conspiratorial wink before turning back to his mother. The security guard at the front desk is very nice. He likes race cars. Mortified and terrified, Ruby snatched his hand. We're leaving now. She dragged him out of the office, sparing only a single, panicked glance back at the man, who was now staring at the folded note as if it were a ticking bomb. Later that night, long after the children were asleep, the jarring sound of splintering wood shattered the quiet of Ruby's small apartment. The front door flew open, and Charles Fields stormed in, flanked by 2 imposing security guards in black suits. He was a tempest in bespoke tailoring, his face a mask of glacial rage. Ruby, who had been sketching designs at her cramped kitchen table, shot to her feet, instinctively placing herself between him and the hallway to the children's bedroom. What do you think you're doing? Get out of my home. Charles ignored her, his eyes sweeping the modest, lived-in space with a dismissive air. He unfolded the note Owen had left, the paper crinkling loudly in the sudden silence. He read the childish scrawl aloud, each word a hammer blow. I am Owen Fields, your son. Find me at 1 to 5 B Willow Creek Lane. His gaze locked onto hers, burning with an intensity that made her skin crawl. My son. You hid my son from me. He is my son. She shot back, her voice trembling but resolute. You have no right to be here. I have every right, he countered, stepping closer, forcing her back. A right you stole from me for 7 years. I'm taking him. Panic seized her. No, you can't just take a child. Watch me. He nodded to his men, who moved with chilling efficiency toward the bedrooms. Ruby tried to block them, but Charles caught her arm, his grip once again inescapable. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Moments later, a sleepy and confused Owen was carried out, wrapped in his blanket. Tears of rage and helplessness streamed down Ruby's face. You monster. Charles's expression was unreadable. Be at the Fields Group headquarters tomorrow at 9 a.m. Design Department, 45th floor. You will be reporting directly to me as my personal design secretary. Your project leader will brief you. He released her, his touch leaving an icy burn. If you ever want to see our son in a civilized manner again, you will be there. The next morning, running on fumes of coffee and sheer terror, Ruby walked into the design department. It was a sterile, glass-encased world of hushed tones and minimalist furniture. A woman with a severe blonde bob and a condescending smirk approached her. Ruby's blood ran cold. It was Vivian Reed, the same woman who had berated her on the roadside that morning after a fender bender, calling her car a scrap heap and her a charity case. Well, Vivian said, her voice dripping with venom. Look what crawled in off the street. I'm your project leader. She gestured grandly to the team of designers, who were all watching with undisguised disdain. Everyone. This is Ruby Flores. Mr. Field has taken a personal interest in her situation. The implication hung poisonously in the air. Vivian leaned in, a voice a cruel whisper for all to hear. I saw Mr. Fields bringing his son, Owen, into the office this morning. It's so wonderful he's finally taking a more public role as a father. Now that I'm here to help him, we can finally be a proper family. The words were physical assault. Vivian was positioning herself as Charles's partner, the mother to the child she didn't even know. Some people will do anything to get close to power, one designer sneered. Probably thinks if she plays the part of an impoverished Becca, she can trick him into giving her a handout. Something inside Ruby snapped. I wouldn't be so sure of your position if I were you, she said, her voice dangerously calm. She met Vivian's shocked gaze. Delusion is a powerful thing. You might want to ask Mr. Fields who Owen's mother actually is before you start planning your imaginary family portrait. Vivian's face contorted in a mask of fury. How dare you? She snatched a cup of hot coffee from a nearby desk and lunged, aiming for Ruby's face. Ruby sidestepped, but the scalding liquid splashed across her arm and the pristine white drafting table, ruining a set of architectural plans. The two women grappled, a clumsy, desperate skirmish of shoves and frantic grabs. What is the meaning of this? The entire department froze. Charles stood at the entrance, his presence commanding absolute silence. His eyes, cold and disapproving, landed on Ruby. Miss Flores, my office. Now, he appeared to side completely with Vivian, whose face broke into a triumphant sneer. Humiliation burned hotter than the coffee on her skin. Inside his office again, the door shut, Ruby finally let her fury erupt. Why bring me here? Was this your plan all along? To let her and your employees tear me apart for sport? Is this my punishment? Charles remained silent, watching her from behind his desk. His expression was a blank wall. He walked over to a credenza, opened a drawer, and retrieved a small first aid kit. He didn't say a word as he approached her, his gaze fixed on the angry red burn on her forearm. He placed a small tube of antiseptic cream on the corner of her new, empty desk. The gesture was so unexpected, so disconnected from the tyrant who had ripped her son from her home, that it stunned her into silence. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He simply provided the balm for the wound his world had inflicted. A silent, complicated acknowledgement that left her more confused and unsettled than ever. The alarm blared through Charles's office, a digital shriek that clawed at his nerves. His chief technology officer's face, pale and sweating, filled the massive monitor on the wall. "It's a cascading system failure, Mr. Fields. They've bypassed every firewall. Our financials are hemorrhaging. We're down 30 million and climbing." Charles stood rigid, his hands gripping the edge of his mahogany desk until his knuckles turned white. 30 million was a flesh wound. If this continued, it would be a decapitation. "Find them. Now, we're trying," the CTO stammered. "But the code it's like nothing I've ever seen. It's elegant, perfect. The hacker isn't breaking in. They're just walking through walls we didn't even know were there." Just as the CTO spoke, the frantic call cut out, replaced by a new video feed. The camera was low, angled up at a small boy sitting in a gaming chair. He had a lollipop stick poking from the corner of his mouth and a familiar, unnervingly calm expression. It was the boy from the interview, Ruby's son. "Hello, Mr. Fields," Owen said, his voice as clear and placid as a frozen lake. He spun the lollipop stick between his fingers. "I believe you were rude to my mother." Charles felt the world tilt on its axis. Fury, hot and blinding, surged through him, but it was chased by a chilling wave of disbelief. "This child, what have you done?" he growled, his voice a low threat. "A demonstration," Owen replied, unfazed. He gestured to a secondary screen visible behind him, where lines of code scrolled at an impossible speed. "Fields Corporation's net worth has dropped by $52 million. I can make it 60, or I can restore it. The choice depends on how you treat Ruby Flores from now on. 52 million. The number was an amble dropping into his stomach. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He was being held hostage by a 7-year-old. A sliver of something akin to grudging admiration cut through his rage. The boy wasn't just smart. He was a prodigy, a dangerous one. "And one more thing," Owen added, his dark eyes so uncannily like his own boring into the camera. "To make sure you don't forget our arrangement, I will be supervising you personally, starting tomorrow." He ended the call, leaving Charles staring at a blank screen, the silence of his office suddenly deafening. The financial bleed on his system monitors stopped instantly. Every dollar was restored. The next morning, the executive floor of Fields Corporation fell into a stunned hush. Charles Fields, a man who commanded boardrooms and terrified competitors, walked out of his private elevator accompanied by a small boy in a custom-tailored suit that was a miniature replica of his own. Owen held his head high, his gaze sweeping over the gawking employees with an imperious air that was both comical and deeply unsettling. He took his place in a leather chair Charles's assistant had hastily pulled up beside the CEO's desk. For the rest of the day, Owen sat in silent judgment, observing meetings and scrutinizing reports over Charles's shoulder. Vivian watched the bizarre spectacle from her glass-walled office, her painted smile tight with suspicion. She saw more than just a precocious child. She saw the proud set of his jaw, the shape of his eyes, the dismissive wave of his hand. She saw Charles Fields, distilled into a 7-year-old package, and a cold dread began to call in her gut. Miles away, in a stately home filled with memories and the profound quiet, Charles's grandmother, Eleanor Fields, scrolled through a peculiar website on her tablet. The years had been lonely, and her deepest regret was the absence of a child's laughter in the cavernous halls. Her eyes, clouded with age and longing, landed on a discreet service, cherished companions. It promised to connect discerning clients with bright, well-mannered children for chaperoned day visits. An absurd idea, born of desperation. But her finger tapped the confirm button anyway. 2 days later, her doorbell rang. When she opened the heavy oak door, she found two impeccably dressed beaux standing on her porch, their hands clasped politely behind their backs. They looked identical, with bright, intelligent eyes and shy smiles. "Hello," the one on the left said, his voice soft. "I'm Kai." "And I'm Dax," said the other. Then, in perfect, rehearsed unison that struck a chord deep in her soul, they looked up at her and said, "It's so nice to finally meet you, Great-Grandma." Eleanor's breath hitched. A tear she hadn't realized was forming traced a path down her wrinkled cheek. She knelt, her old joints protesting, and pulled them into a fierce, trembling hug. She didn't know this was phase 2 of the quintuplet's master plan, a meticulously orchestrated pincer movement designed to conquer the Fields family from both the corporate and domestic fronts. She only knew that after years of silence, her house finally felt like a home. Back in the city, Charles's men were kicking in a different door. They stormed Ruby's old, run-down apartment with a warrant and grim determination. Charles was convinced there had to be more to the story, more children hidden away. But they found nothing. The small apartment was empty, scrubbed clean of any personal effects. The closets were bare, the rooms eerily silent. Owen, ever the strategist, had anticipated his father's move. The moment he'd secured his position at Fields Corporation, he had moved his mother and 4 siblings to a new, untraceable safe house across town. That night, in their new secret home, the 5 children gathered in a circle on the floor. Laptops were open, and a complex flowchart was projected onto the wall. "Great-Grandma is secured," Kai reported, munching on a cookie. "She gave us cookies and wants us to come back tomorrow. Daddy is still an idiot," Owen countered flatly, not looking up from his screen. "He spent all afternoon trying to trace my digital signature. Amateur." Nina, ever the pragmatist, sigh. "This is taking too long. Why can't Mommy and Daddy just figure it out?" "Because adults are slow," Leo stated, adjusting his glasses. "They're complicated." Owen finally looked up, his gaze sweeping over his siblings. "They need a push. My way is direct. Your way is roundabout. Our roundabout way is working." Mia shot back, pointing a crayon at him. "Great-Grandma already loves us," Owen conceded with a slight nod. "Fine. We continue both operations. But we need to accelerate the timeline. It's time they knew they have a family to fight for." The air in the Fields family mansion was as heavy and gilded as the chandelier hanging over the mahogany dining table. Charles stood stiffly beside Ruby, his hand resting on Owen's small shoulder. A silent claim. The matriarch of the family, Eleanor Fields, sat at the head of the table, her expression a mask of regal appraisal. She had orchestrated this tense reunion, a chess master moving her pieces into place. "Charles, darling," Eleanor began, her voice crisp, "I'd like you to meet Kai and Dax. They've been such a delight." On cue, to small beaux with identical mops of dark, wavy hair and eyes the same startling shade of Charles's own blue stepped forward. They were supposed to be the perfect props in Eleanor's scheme to present a wholesome family image. But the moment their eyes landed on Ruby, the script was incinerated. "Mommy!" they shrieked in unison, their little faces breaking into joyous grins. They abandoned their post beside Eleanor and launched themselves across the Persian rug, barreling straight into Ruby's legs and clinging to her like she was their only anchor in the world. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Ruby's blood ran cold, her face flushing with a heat so intense she felt dizzy. "I don't know them," she stammered, her hands hovering awkwardly over their heads. Terrified to touch them. Terrified not to. "You must be mistaken." But the beaux were relentless. Kai buried his face in her dress, his voice muffled. "Mummy, we missed you." "Did you miss us?" Dax tugged on her hand. "Are we going home now?" The denial died on Ruby's lips. The connection was palpable. A current of raw, maternal love that short-circuited every pretense in the room. Charles stared, his mind racing. He had just revealed that Owen was his son, a truth that had already fractured the evening. Now, looking at the two boys clinging to Ruby bows who were miniature versions of himself, a memory surfaced. A faint, dismissive comment Ruby had made years ago. A joke he hadn't understood. What if I had 5 babies at once? His gaze sharpened, moving from the boys to his grandmother. Grandmother, he said, his voice dangerously low and steady. Owen is my son. I know that now. Are they? He didn't need to finish the question. He gestured with his chin towards Kai and Dax, whose faces, turned up towards Ruby, were devastatingly familiar. Mortified beyond measure, Ruby finally found her voice. Excuse me, she announced, her tone brittle. She gently pried the bows off her legs. I think the children need the restroom. Without waiting for a response, she steered the bewildered Kai and Dax towards the hallway, her grip on their small shoulders a mixture of desperation and maternal command. Once hidden from view in a lavish, marble-tiled powder room, she knelt before them, a whisper a frantic hiss. What are you doing? Who told you to do this? You can't call me that here. Kai's lower lip trembled. That we were auditioning to be your sons. For daddy. The word daddy struck Ruby like a physical blow. Their daddy audition. The pieces of their secret plot clicked into place, and her heart fractured. They had engineered this chaos out of a desperate, childish hope. Back in the dining room, Charles watched them go, the seed of doubt now a thorny, unshakable certainty. 5 babies at once. The quintuplets everyone in the city had gossiped about 7 years ago. The children whose mother had remained anonymous. He moved with a sudden, predatory grace, approaching the beau's abandoned place settings, with movements too swift to be noticed. He plucked a few stray hairs from the back of Kai's chair and then Dax's. He already had a sample from Owen. The truth was a lab test away. The atmosphere at the Fields group the next day was just as toxic. But the poison was a slow-acting whisper. Vivian, impeccably dressed and wearing a mask of serene concern, moved from cubicle to cubicle, planting her venom with surgical precision. It's just so tragic, she'd say to one colleague, a voice dripping with false sympathy. To use a child like that, pretending he's yours just to get close to the CEO. Some women have no shame. The gossip spread like a contagion. Colleagues who had once offered Ruby polite smiles now shot her glances filled with suspicion and contempt. Their whispers followed her to the coffee machine and back. Did you see her with Mr. Fields' son? She acts like she's the mother. Vivian is a saint for putting up with it. I heard that boy isn't even hers. She's clearly the biological mother. Look at her, just trying to claw her way back into his life. Ruby tried to ignore it, burying herself in project proposals and market analyses. But the whispers were like 1,000 tiny cuts. Vivian would float past her desk, a picture of magnanimity, offering unsolicited advice with a smile that never reached her cold, calculating eyes. Inside, however, Vivian was simmering. Every time she saw Charles show a flicker of interest in Ruby, a possessive fire burned in her gut. This working-class single mother was a weed in her perfectly manicured garden, and she needed to be ripped out by the roots. This office campaign was only the beginning. Her next move would be far more damaging, something that would destroy Ruby's life outside these glass walls. The pressure finally reached its breaking point late that afternoon. A group of project managers huddled near Ruby's desk, their voices intentionally loud. A woman who abandons her child and then uses him as a bargaining chip. Disgusting. Something inside Ruby snapped. The years of struggle, the sleepless nights, the fierce, all-consuming love for her children, and the sheer injustice of it all boiled over. She stood up, her movements calm and deliberate. She reached into her oversized tote bag and pulled out a small, brightly colored spray bottle. The label read, "Domestic dog repellent, for discouraging unwanted barking." Before anyone could react, she aimed the bottle at the gossiping trio and squeezed the trigger. A fine, citrus-scented mist shot out, startling them into silence. They sputtered, coughing in indignation as they backed away, swatting at the air. "What is wrong with you?" one of them shrieked, wiping her face with a tissue. Ruby placed the bottle back on her desk with a definitive click. "It's non-toxic," she stated, her voice trembling but clear. "It just stops pests from barking where they shouldn't." The office erupted into chaos. Phones came out, recording the scene as indignant colleagues rushed to the aid of the victims. Through it all, Vivian watched from the doorway of her office, a slow, triumphant smile gracing her lips. The fool had just handed her the perfect weapon. Ruby's public, unprofessional meltdown was exactly the ammunition she needed for the insidious attack she was already planning. This was no longer about office politics. This was about total annihilation. The click of Ruby's heels on the polished marble floor was a frantic, desperate heartbeat. Each echo in the cavernous lobby of Fields Corporation was a countdown to the explosion of her life. She bypassed the reception desk, her eyes locked on the private elevator that led to the penthouse suite. To him, the security guard moved to intercept, but a flash of her employee badge and a muttered, "Urgent delivery for Mr. Fields," was enough to make him hesitate. The elevator ride was a silent, suffocating torture. She watched the floor numbers climb, her reflection a pale, haunted mask in the mirrored walls. 7 years of carefully constructed secrets, 7 years of fierce, solitary protection, were about to be atomized by a single sheet of paper. She had to get to it first. She had to. The doors slid open directly into the hushed quiet of Charles's executive suite. His assistant wasn't at her desk. A bad sign. Ruby burst into his office without knocking, her breath catching in her throat. He was there, not behind his sprawling mahogany desk, but standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights beginning to glitter behind him like a distant, indifferent galaxy. And in his hand, held with a terrible stillness, was a single manila envelope. He turned slowly, his face unreadable, but his eyes, those dark, piercing eyes, held a storm. "Ruby," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "I was just about to call you. Charles. Don't." The words tumbled out, a useless plea. "Whatever that is. You don't understand. Let me explain." He took a step toward her, the envelope a stark white flag of surrender in his hand. "Explain. You could start with something you said at the interview. It's been bothering me ever since Owen showed up. You said if you were lucky, you'd have 5 babies at once." His gaze was relentless, peeling back layers she had guarded with her soul. "It seemed like such an odd, specific thing to say, a slip of the tongue, I thought." That now her blood ran cold. He remembered. Of all the things she'd said in her nervous, rambling interview, he had latched onto the one truth she'd accidentally let slip. "I was just rambling. I wasn't thinking. Weren't you?" He closed the distance between them, his presence overwhelming in the suddenly small room. "First, a boy who is my mirror image appears, her paternity test confirming the impossible. Then, 2 more boys show up for a daddy audition, a ridiculous stunt that, I admit, was rather charming, but they look just like him. They look just like me." Ruby reached for the envelope, her fingers trembling. "Please, just give it to me." He held it just out of her reach, his jaw tight. "I already know what it says, Ruby. I don't need a lab to tell me what I feel right here." He pressed a hand to his chest. "But I needed to be sure. I needed to see the proof before I accused the woman He stopped, the words catching in his throat. He looked down at the document, then back at her, his anger warring with a profound, aching hurt. With the flick of his wrist, He tore the envelope open. He pulled out the single sheet of paper, his eyes scanning the clinical text. Ruby watched his expression shift from tense certainty to absolute, earth-shattering confirmation. The muscle in his jaw clenched. Probability of paternity: 99.999%. He read aloud, the words dropping into the silence like stones. He lowered the paper, his gaze locking onto hers. Kai Fields, Dax Fields, my sons. The fight drained out of her, replaced by the hollow echo of defeat. Her shoulders slumped. Yes, she whispered, the admission a crack in her crumbling dam. They're yours, Owen, Kai, and Dax. 3. He repeated, the number a cold, hard fact. But he didn't stop. His mind was working. The brilliant, analytical mind of a CEO piecing together a puzzle 7 years in the making. You didn't say 3, you said 5. Panic flared in her chest again. It was a joke, Charles, a stupid, nonsensical thing to say. She tried to laugh, but it came out as a strangled sob. Who has 5 babies at once? It's absurd, is it? He stared at her, his eyes searching hers for the last hidden piece. He wouldn't let it go. He was a man who dealt in absolutes, in bottom lines. He was so close. Just then, the door opened. His assistant, Margaret, stepped in, holding a tablet. Sir, apologies for the interruption, but the comprehensive background check you ordered on Ms. Flores is complete. There was an anomaly I thought you should see immediately. Charles never took his eyes off Ruby. Show me, Margaret, sensing the catastrophic tension, quickly brought the tablet over. Charles glanced down at the screen. Ruby couldn't see what was on it, but she saw the last vestiges of doubt in his expression evaporate, replaced by a look of such raw, staggering shock that it stole the air from her lungs. He looked from the tablet back to Ruby, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Jude and Tia. He said the names like a prayer, like a curse. You have 2 daughters. He held the tablet out for her to see. It was a class photo from the girls' school. And there they were, her sweet, brilliant girls. Jude, with her father's serious eyes and her own stubborn chin. And Tia, a perfect, delicate fusion of them both, her smile a ghost of Ruby's own. The truth was out, all of it. A gut-wrenching sob tore from Ruby's throat, and her legs gave out. She would have collapsed if Charles hadn't surged forward, grabbing her arms to hold her up. Why? He choked out, his grip bruising. Ruby, for God's sake, why? The dam broke. 7 years of fear, of poverty, of lonely nights and desperate mornings came pouring out in a torrent of tears and ragged words. I was scared, she cried, clutching the front of his suit jacket. Your family, your mother, she offered me a check to disappear. She said I wasn't good enough, that I would ruin you. I was nobody, Charles. I had nothing. I thought you believe her. I thought you'd take them from me, and I couldn't bear it. She told him everything. About running away. About the shock of discovering she was carrying not 1 child, but 5. She told him about the difficult pregnancy, the terror of raising them alone, the constant struggle to keep them fed and safe, the fierce, all-consuming love that was the only thing that kept her going. He listened, his own eyes shining with unshed tears. His anger dissolved, washed away by the tide of her confession. What replaced it was a chasm of regret. 7 years. He had lost 7 years. He had missed their first steps, their first words, their first day of school. He had been living his life in a gilded cage while the woman he loved, the only woman he had ever truly loved, had been raising his 5 children in secrecy and hardship. He saw it all now. The daddy audition wasn't a childish prank. It was a desperate plea from 5 brilliant, scheming little hearts who only wanted their family to be whole. He gently released her arms, his hands moving to cup her tear-streaked face. His thumbs brushed away her tears with a tenderness that made her heart ache. The fury was gone from his eyes, replaced by deep, profound sorrow and the dawning, unwavering resolve. "You thought I would take them from you?" he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Ruby, they're you. How could I ever separate them from the best part of themselves?" He leaned his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. "All this time you did it all alone. You protected them. You protected our children." She looked up at him, her vision blurry, her heart pounding with a fragile, terrifying hope. He pulled back, his gaze steady and clear, leaving no room for doubt. There were no more secrets, no more lies. Only the devastating, beautiful truth that bound them together. "It's over, Ruby," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "The hiding is over." He took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers, a silent promise of partnership, of permanence. "Take me to them." His words hung in the air, simple, powerful, and absolute. Not a demand, but a request, a plea. "Take me to our children."